So let me just, some of you might be aware of Mr. Dinky. Let me introduce him formally. The Hirendra has got more than 33 years of experience and coming from a strong manufacturing background. He's a mechanical engineer, and he has been also the part of the great negotiation of the BorgWarner, during that 1994, I guess. And then the Divgi TTS has come as a brand, and now they are into the manufacturing of all this drivetrain, the system and components manufacturing, supplying maybe more than in 80 countries, I guess. Uh, uh, and they have been practicing sustainability from last 4 years. So, and he's very much supportive and very great experience. And I hope now, before to hand it over to, Mr. Hirendra, um, this he's going to share the same similar kind, the macro level and the micro level thing, but very action oriented steps. The action oriented, the presentation. So let us look forward for this. So you can put your all questions on the chat box. I'll compile them together and I'll ask them during the last 10 minutes. So thank you very much for listening, and over to you, Hirendra. Thank you.
Thank you, Chetan. Thank you for that kind introduction. I would like to thank all the participants who have logged on today. The number of registrations and the people who are participating is an indication of the subject matter being of great interest. I would also like to thank MCCI, in particular Chetan Kumar, who's heading the sustainability desk, for keeping the desk buzzing even in these difficult times. Chetan and I have been trying to organize the sustainability thinking within the MSMEs in Pune. We have also received a great amount of support from the GRI team. And in this presentation and in this session, the idea was to use a case study so that participants can relate to, so that the message we are trying to communicate can be related to. So though the case study is relevant to the automotive industry, I've tried to keep it as generic as possible so that the thought process can be applied to other industries as well. So with that, I would like to begin the session. Is the presentation visible?
Yes, sir, we can see it.
Okay. So let me just give a very short summary of the session. We'll first look at the overview of the case study, and this is a previous crisis that we faced. What were the lessons learned in that process, which led to what we have been calling as developing a deep sustainability thinking. But I like to call it like sharpening our survival instinct, because hopefully as we go through this session, we can see that it's not so much about devising specific actions, but to develop a thinking process that helps you to kind of address different situations. What were the outcomes of that? What were the challenges or things that we learned during the implementation? Why reporting, monitoring, and auditing is important? And lastly, some major takeaways that are relevant to the context of the session today, that is the COVID pandemic, and how this thought process could be possibly applied in this context. I want to start this session with a very emphatic disclaimer. And this statement was brought to my notice by one of our eminent independent directors who are on our board, Mr. Pradeep Dubashi. So the statement is kind of quite revealing. It tells us what the times we are facing today. And people may ask this question, what do you mean by a world that no longer exists? And I think as we go through this session, we will look at aspects of how deep the structural damage could be because of this pandemic, and whether the business world or aspects of society will change forever or not is a debatable question indeed, but I feel already the impact is severe enough that it will lead to certain long-lasting structural changes. Let's look at first the crisis that or the case study that I mentioned. This was the 2008 global financial crisis that all of us experienced. It was the deepest one that we experienced in our business life. It really disrupted our operations for close to a year. Just to give the group the background, the enterprise was our enterprise, which is in automotive components. The ecosystem is sometimes also important, because sometimes some crises are local in nature, some are global in nature, and the effects on different locations could be different. So just to get the understanding correct, I've kind of specified, we are headquartered in Pune, but what is important is also the customer geographies. This may be relevant to some, not relevant to others, but the reason I put this as part of the information is to understand the impact. Because we had a fairly global customer base that included, of course, India, China, Thailand, USA, and Korea. And at that point in time, I remember exports was roughly 50%, close to 50% of our revenue. So the impact was global, as we expect this crisis to be. So what we learned through that crisis, some of those aspects could be relevant now as well. We also had a global supplier base, and this is also important to understand that how supply chains can get disrupted, what can be done to kind of get back on track, what needs to be done, what are the implications of a disruption in our global supply chain. Where your organization stands in the value chain it has its own implications. And in this case study, we represented both the tier 1 as well as in some businesses we were at tier 1 position, in some we were at a tier 2 positions, and the impacts on both these were slightly different. That crisis lasted for a year. It started in December 2008, and it took us the first, I would say, January to March of 2010 to actually start recovering. So the duration of the crisis is also important, because what steps you take in kind of tackling through the crisis. If the crisis is long, of a long duration, it has certain very, very different challenges. Now, whatever may be the nature or the trigger for the crisis, the way it manifests itself to a business, there are certain commonalities. So let's look at in what way did the last crisis manifest itself to us. There was a sharp decline in orders, I would say drastic. In some cases, for example, the US market was for 6 to 7 months was completely wiped out. It was zero. But overall, schedules dropped by around 50%. It immediately triggered an inventory pileup because it was so sudden. There was a severe disruption in the supply chain, both short-term and long-term. There was an overall freeze in liquidity, layoffs across the value chain that further disrupted both demand and supply chains. And most importantly, that many people underrate is the kind of nervousness and fear it creates within your own team, within your own organization, and how it changes their behavior in tackling this crisis. So these were, I'm just putting down some points as part of our experience. Just recalling what we did at a tactical level at that time, we realized that sudden disruptions require quick responses. And this is indeed very, very important. So we immediately set up what we called as a war room, which was a cross-functional team. And this is important because these crises are typically so fluid and so volatile that it's very difficult to have a single pointed strategy to work your way through this. So we prepared what was called as a living document, as a response plan, which was updated periodically, revised, and the status of that was, the date was specifically put at, that this was the best plan as of that date and was subject to revision. So the document has to be a living document, and it needs to be revised as depending on the severity of the response required. One fundamental aspect that we developed was what we, and this was also, I think, now discussed amongst other industry members as well. I remember Mr. Anirban Ghosh also mentioned this point in his session a couple of days back, is to establish a margin of safety. What you mean by an operational margin of safety is the level of operations at which you can maintain break even. And this is extremely critical to establish. It may be different for different industries, for different segments. In our case, it was roughly what we had to respond to, that is 50% of our order book evaporating. So we had to operate at 50% of the previous year's scale of operations and devise methods to make the operations break even at that 50% level. Next, of course, everybody, this is a no-brainer, but still very, very important, worth mentioning, is conserve cash. Cash is king in any crisis situation. It makes no sense having it in your books because the situation is volatile. It has to be cash in hand. So there are ways to what we did to address this. And of course, to be able to get to the margin of safety, it required a multi-pronged attack, right from operations, logistics, supply chain. There was, which we will in the next couple of slides, we will look at some examples. It may be different for different industries, but I thought I would share our experience so that people can relate to it. And most importantly is also enhanced communication. A crisis situation requires extremely high level of communication. Never underestimate this because everybody is nervous. The situation is changing fast. And in this situation, having a reliable, accurate communication channel across all stakeholders is extremely important. So these are some of the relevant examples of what specific tactical actions we took in addressing that crisis. First, we developed a review protocol with all our customers to enable us to assess the volatile situation at their end, because that was what was driving whatever actions we took. So we requested them and set up a very frequent review protocols that enabled us to understand how the situation at our customers was changing. that helped us plan our internal activities a little better, though it was a very fast moving situation. This is also important because when there is a crisis or a disruption of such nature, there can also be small niches of opportunities where you share where you have a share of business with a customer and other competitors who might fail in their deliveries. It creates small niches of opportunities for you to tap into. So for this reason, it's extremely important to have a very frequent review process with your customers. We quickly recalibrated our economic dispatch quantities to be able to serve the customer better, because the realization is that your OEMs, your suppliers, everybody is going through this crisis. So whatever you can do at your level in easing the supply chain, one has to take those steps. So we recalibrated our economic dispatch quantities to be able to serve our customer better in smaller batches. Addressing the issue of the cash issue that that I mentioned in the previous slide, a razor sharp focus on receivables. Sometimes it is also a good practice to give a reasonable discount to your customer and kind of retrieve the cash even in advance, because you never know when the value chain, when the liquidity is going to freeze up. So it's better to be a little more conservative here and recover cash as quickly as possible, even if it means giving a reasonable discount to your customers, because if the liquidity dries up, then the opportunity to recover that cash is even more difficult. Next is what steps you could do internally, and this is where which I will take later on in the slides, what we learned out of this process. But tactically, what we did at that time was across the board salary reduction, right? It starts with the managing director right down to the to all employees, and it has to be transparent. And this is where the war room and the strategy that we set up helped us communicate to the rest of the team of why this was necessary to meet that MOS. And once there is transparency, the acceptance is there. And of course, it has to be backed with a very firm commitment to reinstate when the situation improves. So managing this is critical. You also need to renegotiate your entire supply chain, both in terms of volumes, payment terms, wherever you can eke small ways of streamlining the supply chain. One has to be fair in doing this because, as I said earlier, the whole value chain is facing this crisis. One example of, I can say, is to encourage collaboration in the value chain, because in any value chain, there are some nodes or some organizations who at that point in time are financially more stronger, they have more liquidity, and they can facilitate certain things in the value chain to ensure that the chain doesn't break. And this should be encouraged, but it doesn't mean that the entity or the organization taking that hello? Can anybody hear me?
No, sir, you continue. Somebody just talked in between. I have muted him.
Okay, thanks. So, so if your relative cash position is better and you can facilitate a little bit the supply chain, the entity taking that burden should also benefit. Benefit could come in terms of improved share of business in regular times after the crisis is over. So this has to be thought through and negotiated quickly and properly. Looking at internal operations, we kept a very sharp focus on variable cost drivers. Cost drivers for different industries, for different segments can be different. You have to identify those variable cost drivers in your operations quickly and attack them with this speed and alacrity that the situation demands. Some things that we did was multi-skill our personnel, and this helped us to keep the headcount per shift down, because if you don't have multi-skilling, then you necessarily have to call the full staff who are at a who are operating at a much lower efficiency because the demand is down. So if you have multi-skilling, you can rotate the people in different shifts, or sometimes we went through phases where we had to retrench some people. It was just not sustainable to meet that MOS. But that can also be done judiciously and fairly, where you could rotate the retrenchment across either 2 months or 3 months, so that everybody shares the gain and the pain. Another idea that we did quite well was to modularize our capacity so that certain sections of the shop floor could be shut down. This helped in energy cost as well as consumables. And it's a learning that can be taken forward in terms of how you do your layouts in the future to modularize your capacity wherever it is possible. I understand that many industries have processes that such opportunities are not there, but wherever these opportunities exist, we should look at this even for the future. Small things like if you are able to do this, negotiate with your utility supplier to reduce your maximum demand load so that your fixed energy costs are lower. One thing that the next point is I lay tremendous emphasis on is to scrutinize every consumable consumption data you have, because typically industrial engineers, productivity engineers, whatever norms we set in normal times, it's not to blame them or anything, because certain factors of safety are kept to make the predictions reliable, but special times calls for special treatment of this. So there is always, we found out that there is always scope for improvement on standard consumption norms that are set in what I call as normal times. So that's something that we looked at. And another very interesting methodology or tool to use is value stream maps, which tracks as the value grows through of the product through your shop floor. Which are the processes that add value, which are the processes that don't add value, and aggressively attack those that don't add value and eliminate that waste. So these were certain internal processes we took in tackling and meeting that MOS target that we had set for ourselves. Going through this, what are the lessons learned that we can carry forward? And this is important because this is really, that crisis was so deep that it taught us a few things that sometimes are not apparent. I think the biggest lesson we learned was to relearn, is because whatever so-called wisdom we had was not applicable through that period, because the disruption was so severe, so sudden, that we had to do things differently to address that situation. Fortunately, most of the global economy rebounded quite fast after that, and the fear was that whether that learning will remain with us or not. But this is where I think through the next slides, I will share with you all what we did in terms of retaining part of that learning. And it is also important to understand what needs to be retained, because if these are tactical steps, they may not be applicable, because every major disruption or a crisis is different. This one is drastically different from the one that we faced in 2008. it threatens to be much more severe, much more global in its effect of its impact, and we really don't know how this is going to impact the future. The way to tackle this crisis, the tools, the methods are different. So there are a lot of things that we need to relearn, new things we need to apply. But I think what is important is to develop an attitude, a thinking process or a discipline, if you will, that will strengthen your organization to have an innate ability or an attitude to think its way through a crisis that throws a completely new situation where you need to learn new things. So we call it the deep sustainability thinking. And if you will, you can also call it sharpening your survival instincts. But it's easier said than done. It needs to be practiced, and it has to be deeply ingrained in your organization. It should be part of you like an immune system. And to get that practice and that discipline ingrained into you is the challenge. So let's look at some of the aspects we thought in developing this sustainability thinking. I personally think any thought process of this nature has to be deeply embedded in the society's cultural roots, in the society in which the organization exists or operates. I'll give you an example of this. Some of the best industry practices that Japan has taught the world were deeply ingrained in the Japanese society. A tool like Kaizen. So for something like this, there has to be a deep cultural connect. Otherwise, your organization finds it difficult to imbibe it. And so we looked at going back to our cultural philosophy. One of the root philosophies we have based on which actually the whole practice of yoga, which is now world renowned, is established, is the Sankhya philosophy. And without going too much into the terminology, and I will kind of focus on the essence of what this philosophy is and how we could possibly apply it to the challenge we face. Basically, as the word, and if somebody wants to know a little bit more about Sankhya philosophy, of course, there are many books. But very briefly, I will say it was propounded by a great sage called Kapila sometime in 700 BC. And I would say amongst all the ancient philosophies of India, this philosophy comes as close as possible to modern scientific thought process. And that's the reason we find it so attractive in in what it propounds. So as the word implies, it is right knowledge, right number or measure, and it's used in modern day Hindi also. It refers to the theory of causation. And the root question being asked is, does the effect pre-exist in the material cause? So what I like about a lot of the ancient philosophy is a root statement is always presented in various facets of it. So the core statement that it says is the effect, in the next slide, we will see what you mean by effect. Effect is not a new creation, but only an explicit manifestation of what is implicitly contained in the material cause. So if one internalizes this philosophy, it teaches us that the solution is sometimes, or most of the times, implicit in the problem itself. It's easier said than done. I'm not saying it's as easy as that, but the trick lies in mastering a discipline that enables our organization to respond appropriately to new crises. So, as I said earlier, it's much like an immune system. And since this crisis is related to health, I'm sure all of us are reading how immune systems are work, and so there are two immune systems that are at work. One is the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. So I think what needs to be mastered is how to train ourselves to stimulate that adaptive immune system that is so important when it faces a new crisis. So, briefly, I say it's like developing a new age yoga practice for our organization. And for simplicity, I'm just calling it a deep sustainability thinking. So, as I said earlier, what I like about most of our ancient philosophies is the same statement is presented in different formats or different, I would say, facets that allow us to draw different meaning from it. So, the same statement is stated differently. It is making what was implicit explicit, or it could be restated and said that the effect is the real transformation of its cause. These are different ways to look at it. And basically, I also give a lot of importance to this statement that says that all material effects are modifications. And in this case, if the cause is a lot of destruction, and if that is involution, then production is evolution. So the evolution process is also implicit in this destruction that may happen. And so if the effect is the crisis, it can be the solution. An effect can be a solution as well. So I just want you to kind of keep these tenets as an essence in the background as we go through the presentation from here onwards. So what were the outcome measures looking at this practically is while we practiced all the lessons learned of the 2008 crisis, we were also acutely aware that the next crisis could be radically different. Maybe the same tools will not apply. And this learning came through the process itself, because what we did through that process in 2008 was never done before. So that gave us the realization that maybe the next crisis we have to do things radically differently. But how do we draw insights out of this? And fortunately for us, in 2014 or 15, actually this process was initiated by one of our dear old customers, Mahindra, in collaboration with KPMG and the GRI. They introduced us to the system of sustainability reporting. And in that process, we found a formal structure or an insight to develop this practice or this attitude of continuously keeping our survival instinct sharpened in perpetuity. So basically, this sustainability reporting methodology gave a formal structure to what we were doing internally and much more informally. So I will just very quickly give you a broad kind of outline on this, because there are many experts who can train organizations to do sustainability reporting. And we have amongst us Chetan Kumar, who is an eminent practitioner of this. So if somebody is interested, they can, of course, get in touch with Chetan Kumar and the sustainability desk at MCCI. But I'll just very quickly point out what are the things that are extremely important. First is the stakeholder inclusiveness. And this is the bedrock foundation I think many people overlook in terms of who are the real stakeholders, how many stakeholders can you include and connect to as part of your business. And this process is indeed, for us, it was very educative. And it's important that, and of course, the stakeholders can be different for different industries. So it is important that each organization kind of includes the larger stakeholder community, because in a crisis like this, stakeholders that do not look apparently important could influence your future drastically. So the better inclusiveness you have of stakeholders, the better it is. The next is to, of course, establish the sustainability context. And this itself is the power of this tool, is because you can change the context and the tool will help you deliver what needs to be delivered. And this is where I say the flexibility in the system comes, is that it's a practice, it is an attitude building method, and you change the context and hopefully it gives you the result of what the issues, that is the next point, what are the aspects that have materiality, and how do you identify this? There are methods, there's a rigor and a practice to this, and this is what the organization needs to imbibe. But if done properly, by changing the sustainability context, you can very quickly, and if you have practiced this, then you can identify what are the aspects that are material to it and how do you address them. So there is a whole, what should I say, method of doing this. And I will leave that detail of this method out of this session, because there are, I could ask Chetan to organize another session to do the basic sustainability reporting methodology in a little more detail. So with that, I go to the next slide. Is just to give you an example of how large the stakeholder community is actually, not just internal stakeholders, but also external stakeholders. And this is just a representative example. It would be much deeper and wider than this. One issue here I would like to kind of mention, which many of us overlook, is the government. Whatever you do, the government is I call it a roughly 30% stakeholder in your business. So they are an extremely important stakeholder, and sometimes we just take their participation very passively. And through this process, through this session, I want to make this point that if they are a 30% stakeholder in your business, we should not just take their participation passively. There has to be active advocacy that we as industry can do with the government in channelizing their policies. And of course, if all of us are looking at this in a sustainable fashion, I'm sure the suggestions that go from the industry to the government to support in us in this period of crisis will be a constructive one, not just to protect the interests of a specific small group. But as I said, the deeper the crisis, advocacy with the government is extremely important. And this will happen only when we identify them as a important stakeholder in our business. So this is just an example of the different aspects, how we categorize them: economic responsibility, environment responsibility, social responsibility. And this was a snapshot of what we did maybe say 2 years back. Now, if you apply the context of the COVID crisis that we are facing, you will see that suddenly the issues shift towards social responsibility and environment, because public health has become the real crisis. And we have to first address that. Only then can we address the economic and other responsibilities, though all of them are equally important. So this is, I just presented this as an example that you change the context of sustainability, and the process guides you through all these aspects of what are really material in handling that context. So through the cross-functional teams, we quickly develop what is called as a materiality matrix. And this again, as I said, changes as the context changes, as your industry is different. And basically it tracks, it classifies all those aspects into various categories of impact. Those that have very high impact of immediacy, or either the impact, either the economic impact or the business continuity impact are very high. So we have to identify them and into different impact levels, so that the required priority in addressing this is also set. What is also important is how do we organize both the business and corporate governance to address this. So this requires definitely some kind of transformational leadership. You have to empower your team to be able to do this. And only an empowered team can deliver. To empower the team, you have to have a governance philosophy that is transparent, that is holistic, and it is fair. So certain key things have to be looked at from the top level. The process, of course, is engaging with all the stakeholders, then through board activation. And here again, I would like to stress that this has to start at the top. Many MSMEs don't take the board function seriously. I think all MSMEs who are in the private sector have to empower the boards. You have to attract talent, good, competent, independent directors on your board. It's only through that process will you strengthen the process of getting these systems through your organization. And it's only then that it becomes a practice, it becomes a discipline. So what, just briefly I'll share what it resulted in. It resulted in this pyramid that we call, at the foundation is extremely good financial discipline, manufacturing excellence, and collaboration. Collaboration is important in this networked world. It will be all the more important in handling this crisis. And as part of what comes out of this process, which I'll take a little more in detail in the next slide, is how do you do risk analysis and business continuity, which is one of the key functions of sustainability thinking. So in our case, it led to product and application diversity and geographic diversity. So these were not only growth drivers, but also it helped us make the organization more sustainable in its from terms of business continuity management. And of course, to cap all this, you need some market leadership, and we recognize that through technology-led innovation. This was relevant to us. It could be different aspects for different industries. So this is what I was mentioning in the last slide is the risk management process for business continuity. This is one of the key cornerstones of sustainability reporting and thinking is how do you identify risks, and when you do the materiality matrix and those impacts, you are able to widen your vision in terms of what is the context in which risks can happen? How do you identify those risks? So it just helps you, it gives you a better tool, not only to establish the context, but also to identify risks. And then, of course, you need to have those processes to analyze, and on the positive side, because risks are this old saying that there is no gain if there is no pain. So risks are there, but there's a positive aspect to it and there's a negative aspect. Positives are those niches that you can exploit, those experiences that you can share and gain, and those experiences that can be enhanced. The negative aspects are those that need to be avoided or mitigated, or sometimes you have to just accept it. There are certain situations that come what may, you cannot change. So, but that acceptance also means that you have accepted it with certain amount of internal redressal processes. So it becomes a very powerful way of managing your business continuity. And this will have a lot more. I would like to kind of close this session by seeing how all this can now be applied to the current context of what we are facing. So let's all be clear that this crisis is extremely severe, it's unprecedented, and I don't think anybody in this session has ever experienced something like this in their lifetime. This is just a snapshot of what effect it has on MSMEs just in 6 weeks. This was also shared with us by one of our eminent directors on our board. And this data is of 17th of March. And this survey shows that already 27% of MSMEs are out of cash, are out of funds. And out of that 20%, by now, I think as the COVID tracker is changing, this tracker will also be, unfortunately, that severe. And this is the reason I say that it is time that we understand who the stakeholders are in this. And the government is a major stakeholder, and we as industry have to organize ourselves and have our engagement with this stakeholder in managing this crisis. So as major takeaways, what are the material issues in context of the COVID-19 crisis? First and foremost, that was not there in the previous crisis, is employee safety against a life-threatening disease. How do you handle this first? If you're unable to address this, tackle this, and handle this, you can't just start your industry. So that is point number one. Other aspects are business continuity in rapidly falling demand. You don't know how deep this is going to be. Some industries are absolutely facing threat of a total wipeout. The airline industry, the cinema, the theaters, restaurants. I don't know how this crisis is going to unfold, and some of them may be seeing a complete collapse. So how does industry, how does society respond to this? So I'm just making a list of what the material issues are, because these also impinge on our industry. It's not that you are isolated from it. If other sectors go down, it brings down the overall economy. The overall economy does impact your industry in one way or the other. So it is important to understand the wider implications of this crisis. establishing your specific business MOS in this crisis with whatever best knowledge you have. And as I said, it has to be a live document. At any point of time, it is the best guess at that time. It may change after 2 weeks, it may change after 4 weeks, but at that point in time, it's your best guess and you have to work with that. So developing that operations margin of safety, employee morale and willingness, this is a new aspect to us. In the 2008 crisis, we just had to convince the workforce to take certain cuts, for certain retrenchments, depending on the situation. We were lucky that the rebound was fast. We reinstated all those deductions that we had made, and it left a very strong impression on the employees, which is helping us in this crisis. But this is different because of the health safety. You have to motivate people just to come to work. There could be real problems of migrant labor. In our case also, there are many young engineers who live away from their homes, who live in shared apartments, where there is a difficulty in accommodating them. So there are new things that this crisis is throwing up at us, which need to be addressed. Supply chain disruption, that is more or less common to what happened last time, maintaining liquidity. But we also have to look at, in doing this, on certain positives as well, is what are the immediate adjacencies of opportunities. As I mentioned, if you have a share of business in a supply chain, if other suppliers are failing, is it creating some opportunity for you? In the automotive world, the whole global supply chain is getting re-engineered. So it is creating new opportunities. You have to work through them as much as the fluidity and the confusion that is there in the market. There could be adjacencies of opportunities where if one of your suppliers is failing, and if it's a critical supplier, you may have to take a decision to do that operation in-house. So though it is an added investment, it could be an opportunity for the future, because the world has changed now, and bringing that process in-house could, in this new context, could be an opportunity. The point that I made in the last slide, active advocacy through industry associations like MCCI to influence government policy. Government policy will be required to help this industry out of this crisis. And it's my firm belief that industry organizations will have to get together to voice their concerns, to channelize ideas through industry associations, to influence the government to make policies that are fair and sustainable. Because government policies many a times are driven by political considerations, and they might be in the short term harmful in a way that sets the industry back, from which gaining back is impossible. So, and I say this with utmost seriousness, that I hope the government very soon does not have to track MSE mortality as they're tracking COVID mortality. The situation is that serious. Of course, to navigate through this crisis, you have to look at short-term restructuring, whether capacities within your organization have to be restructured, how do you reorganize labor. A lot of tactical issues like we did in the last crisis are applicable here, but also equally important, which will be different from last time, is evolving strategy to address long-term business continuity. Because this time, this issue will be completely different. We don't know how it will impact the market, and how long, whether there'll be structural breaks that completely demolishes one market segment, it may create new market segment, it may create new opportunities. But these are the evolving strategy is something that has to be addressed. Last part of this presentation, I'll quickly just give examples of how sustainability thinking that we have practiced over the last 4-5 years is today helping us in certain ways. I don't claim that we have all the answers. This crisis is too deep and wide, but in certain aspects, definitely it is helping us. And I thought I would just share some examples. Let's look at employee safety of the life-threatening issue. Though this is a challenge we are facing for the first time, we have a mature process of addressing industrial safety in terms of how do we source our safety gear, how do we practice it in terms of training people to wear it properly, to use it properly. So even though this biological crisis is forcing us to look at different kinds of equipment, the methodology, the processes are in place to implement this quickly. Even the internal costing structures, okay, if this has to be done for a long period of time, suppose this as a method of practice has to be practiced for 2 to 3 years till the virus is found. And if that's the new normal, then industry has to accept this, that we have to work in this new way. How do you bring that costing into your product costing? So these tools are already available with us that enables us to move fast. The investments that we did in telecommunications and IT for a very different reason, to increase middle management efficiencies. Part of it was done to reduce our carbon footprint in terms of people who are traveling up and down through our different plants to just manage systems. We put telecommunications, video conferencing. All these tools now can be enhanced to practice social distancing, to remotely manage wherever possible. Second aspect is achieving challenging operating margins. How do we do this? And okay, multi-skilling, which we did, we sharpened those that learning into what we called as operator licensing. It is a very well practiced system now. Every operator in our plant has a operating license card. So the whole system has enabled us to multi-skill them. We exactly know which operator has which skill sets. So as we bring the team back together from wherever they've gone into their hometowns, so as we bring the team back, we exactly know which operator has which skill sets through this mapping process that we have done. And it helps us to put the team together quickly to plan our shifts in such a way that to enable the social distancing that we have to practice. How do we, this multi-skilling is one of the key tools with which we can now hopefully practice, the social distancing and still manage to balance capacities and the customer demands. Also, the past experience of sincerely communicating to our team why that wage cut we had to do, the way we reinstated it once the crisis was over, the investment that we have made in leadership, in training, all that gives our employees confidence that if we are putting or implementing a wage cut, it is fair, and once that it is saving their jobs, it is saving their organization, and once the crisis is over, it will be reinstated. So this past history has definitely helped us in our team willingly accepting this this time around. Well, that point is more or less repeated for another aspect that we look at. Also important is in the sustainability reporting process, the kind of communication channels you establish, those communication channels are today helping us to communicate properly with people. This situation is demanding much more intense communication, and those communication channels are helping us. As far as supply chain disruption is concerned, what we practiced as a sustainability effort in terms of what we did with vendor rating, the way we have done the assessments, the way we have shared business, share of business based on their vendor rating. They know the system is transparent and fair. As part of our risk analysis and sustainability practices, identifying our supplier as a critical stakeholder in the business, we have instituted fairly fair dispute resolution processes that gives the supplier also confidence that even if there is a dispute, it is addressed fairly and resolved constructively. So this discipline and this practice is serving us this time in communicating to suppliers what they should do to keep the supply chains alive, how to address this crisis jointly. Maintaining liquidity was a no-brainer. That crisis taught us the lessons, some lessons very hard way. So way back, we decided to have a war chest of funds, both to address growth and to address challenges like these. And we hope that this crisis will not be deep enough, long enough, and severe enough that we erode that war chest. But it is there to help us to fight it, to fight the crisis in its immediate requirements. The evolving strategy is something absolutely uncharted territory. So this requires us to identify what are the areas, what will happen, whether new market segments will come, but we should also, and this is one of the cornerstones again of Sankhya philosophy, is that you should never get too much overwhelmed by so-called news. It's, as the philosophy says, it's proper right knowledge and measurement. So if that is done properly, your responses are also right and measured. So as much as the crisis is putting all kinds of difficulties in the short term, it is like the mythological Manthan. In this process of churning, there are a lot of diamonds that will be thrown ashore, and one has to look at whether there are opportunities of technology acquisition that were not there before the crisis, new ways of working, remote management techniques that are today are kind of being forced on us, but whether this leads to a more efficient way of working in the future, modularization of our manufacturing infrastructure. One thing we are looking at closely is what are the core competencies that we have that will be relevant in the new market, the way it is evolving. It is an evolving situation, but we are pretty sure that the way the world will change, we may have to acquire new competencies. So one has to be aware and flexible enough to address this. Last but not the least, I will also say the way the world is changing, there could be new ways of funding new growth. Traditional banking concepts might break down, new instruments, new tools, new ways of funding growth might emerge. One has to keep our eyes peeled and open for such opportunities. So in the closing statement, I say something that is apparent on its own, and I don't think I need to add any comment to this. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you everybody for your kind attention, and I'll be back to take some questions and answer them as the best of my ability. Thank you so much.
So thank you, Hiren. It was really interesting and very insightful presentation, and the the contents that you have shared. I feel that starting from short term to long term impact, short term actions to the long term actions, and even what we want and what is required. You have balanced it very well. So because you have covered so many things, I don't think so there will be any questions hardly. But I had checked because the time is also less. I had checked on the chat, so I can see only one question on the that slide number 6. The planning. So I think we can just share that slide. I think no need to even answer that question now. So only one question from my side for you. Because of this, the entire supply chain disruption, and you also have some suppliers or the vendors from China. So what is your backup plan for it? How are you going to address that quickly?
Yeah, see, as I said, the situation is a fast evolving one, and it's very difficult to predict at this point in time how demand is going to unfold. There are a lot of certain temporal challenges, some medium term challenges, and some long term challenges. So, for example, this disruption has been so massive that containers in the shipping industry are stuck in certain areas. So even if there is product available somewhere, because of containment, because of health challenges, shipping lines are not on time. So there's a lot of other disruption which will take some time to settle down. And
Yeah.
so generally our strategy is to try to retain our existing supply chain as much as possible, find short-term solutions to that. But in the long term, whether there will be a redefinition of this, it will all depend on how deep this crisis goes. So it's very
Okay.
at this point in time.
Thank you. Thank you, Hiren. So there is one more question from one of the participants, because the auto sector has been suffering from a lot from last 2 years, and some industries are saying that they have already implemented a lot many cost saving measures. Yeah. So how long still they have to do so in the future, and how they can improve further? That is the question.
Yeah. Yeah. So, the industry, if specific to the automotive industry, I think an already difficult situation has been made more difficult by this pandemic. The industry itself was at the cusp of a major disruption because of certification, because of emission norms. Specifically, look at the Indian industry itself. Implementation of BS6 was on its way. CAFE norms were slated to be brought in by 2022. So as itself, on its own, the industry was facing a lot of challenges.
Right.
I think at this point in time, everybody has just gone into survival mode. It's just making sure that the industry is kept alive. Whatever minimum schedules can be eked out and supplied, that itself is a challenge.
Very.
In the medium term, these issues like reconfiguring the supply chain, costing issues will come. But at this point in time, the impact is so drastic that everybody is just in survival mode.
Right. So now it's a really good question that way, because so I'll suggest just to add on to the here and what he has said, but one has to think of maximizing the value in survival thing also. and looking for more diversification. That's where you mentioned about the business continuity policy and all those things, and also the strategy, and also to fine tune more on the cost reduction aspect, of course, because there we feel that you have implemented everything, but there are always a scope, and also to take maybe the support of whatever the government relief is giving, the schemes. One should also be active on learning what is applicable for us and what is not. Anyway, so there are 2-3 more questions. As I can see, I will just take it because those are quite relevant questions, I feel so, for the participants. So Hiren, so the one question is, uh, which were those steps, to be taken by the management, to ingrain sustainability measures during, the uh, the the last crisis into the DNA of the organization, especially ones on the economic part.
Yeah.
I think it is quite a vast question, but I think you can just.
Yeah, it's a fairly all-encompassing question, but it's a good one because I think the key to that question is what steps to be taken that the thinking process is ingrained in the organization. I think that's important. The methodology may be different depending on the industry, but it's important that that the whole organization kind of accepts it, and it becomes ingrained in its DNA. It is a challenge, but I think it may be different for different industries. I can only relate what we did is this real experience that we had gone through of the 2008 crisis, and in addressing that, whatever small informal processes that we had taken on the shop floor or in our strategy or in our business development, we connected all of them and put it under the umbrella of this sustainability thinking. So people could relate to it. What this tool did is only to help people better connect the dots, to see the interrelationships, and that helped them, or rather, in fact, it worked to our advantage that people were able to appreciate the interconnectedness of what they were doing. Okay, if one guy was doing a small project on the shop floor, saving, say, 2% of energy on his workstation, how that gets connected to the overall story, they were able to make those connections. I think very empowering for people.
Got it. Thank you. I think we will just now close session in next 4 minutes.
I have just, if with your permission, I have just one question that came to me directly, if I may just quickly answer that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so the question was that if this becomes a long drawn out crisis, will social distancing and new methods become the norm in the way people work? Yes, it could become, but that is not something I think we should be particularly worried about, because if you look at it in the past, what the quality system methodologies, what organizations implemented and what they're doing now, we should look at it just in that way. We were handling industrial safety, certain industrial accidents being the major context. Now we have to look at it from a public angle as well. So yes, it will have increased costs, but I think the whole society as a whole will accept it, because without that, society will not be able to function. So though there are costs involved, how to bake them into your product cost judiciously is the trick, and it will have to be implemented.
Okay, thank you. So there are 3 more questions. I think you can just quickly answer those. How do you ensure your sustainability measures, are aligned with those of your customers and suppliers?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You can just straight away answer this question in a percentage.
Yeah, because see, there are enough processes in the sustainability mapping, like when if your customer is an important stakeholder, you're always listening to what the customer is saying. If your supplier is an important stakeholder, in that stakeholder inclusiveness, a lot of these issues get the visibility and get addressed.
Yes, yes. Thank you. So how do you differentiate between the measures taken to tide over a crisis versus measures that should form as a sustainable thinking, part of the sustainable thinking, during the crisis and the sustainable thinking?
Yeah, that's again a good question. And this, because you do your sustainability review every year, you are refreshing the sustainability context every year. So if there is something that is relevant going forward, that gets retained as a practice to be followed. If if the sustainability context changes drastically,
Right.
they get dropped out. Yeah.
Right. But if
the mechanism itself allows you to do that.
Yeah. But if someone is, keep practicing, I will say here, because the capacity gets built and the training is, of course, is the important part. So you have to, because nowadays also and in future also, the training will be going to be a key thing,
True.
And if they're practicing, then, it builds and it shifts from one point to another point very easily. So the last question I'll take now, can you suggest the starting point during the cash crunch time towards sustainability?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Can you suggest a starting point during this cash crunch time towards sustainability?
Well,
Starting point. He's asking for the starting point because we are all now there in the cash crunch thing. Because sustainability, people feel that it's only about environment, no?
No, that's the perception I was trying to change through this presentation. Is that
now that has changed.
Sustainability is not just about the environment. It is about long-term survival.
The question is, what will be the starting point? Because they are already in the
I would
cash
say
crunch.
I would say the starting point is making that war room of bringing a cross-functional team together to understand what are the things that are going to impact you in the next week, and how you're going to ideas of how you're going to implement that. So that war room can be your cross-functional team going forward after the crisis is over. Your cross-functional team for your sustainability thinking.
I think your presentation can guide him well. They can be starting over it.
Okay.
So that's a great thing. So there is one more question, last question I will take. How do you communicate with your employees so that there is a healthy and transparent, I don't know. There are some sensitive things in the organization, or for the retreatment during the crisis. So how do you communicate with the employees?
There will always be sensitive information in any organization. I'll be realistic, but that's what I meant when I showed you the slide of the enabled transformational team and the governance practices. Is the more transparency you have in the organization to the maximum level, that much is encouraged. There could be technological sensitive information, there could be financially very sensitive information. That those firewalls is for each management to decide what those firewalls are. But as a general practice, the best possible transparency that you can keep internally in your organization is the best practice, because then your team starts trusting the management that much more.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Viren. It was really very insightful and very valuable one. So, Sudhanva, are you there?
Yes.
So I think just 1 minute you have to conclude in 1 minute, because we already passed 28 minutes.
Sure. Sure. Hiren sir, thank you very much. It was a really insightful one, and I think lessons learned. But this is an unparalleled crisis. So, but yes, some pointers from 2008-9 crisis and maybe 100 years ago crisis. but in the new generation and new age format, you've been able to put it in about an hour plus. So in terms of risk mitigation, building teams, building a resilient organization, pointers for survival, pointers for cash management, giving a confidence to the supply chain across the board, and most importantly, communication amongst your stakeholders, including the employees. I think you captured it really, really well. And as we were discussing the other day, that sustainability is not a topic only for the bigger boys. It's affecting everybody, and hopefully this particular crisis will help us in propagating the message that sustainability, in mainstreaming the sustainability across the segments. And I thank you for all the support that you have given to our sustainability desk all these years. Ever since its inception, I remember a very, very small conversation I had with Jiten sir a couple of years ago. From then on, you have been really helpful. So thank you very much, and thank you to all the participants, and thank you, Chetan, for structuring this session and giving all of us the opportunity to learn a few tips in this global crisis, which could potentially be an opportunity also to reshape our own businesses and reap the benefits. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.